Most people walk through life on solid ground, trusting the visible world. They build their houses, their careers, their families on foundations they believe are firm. This was my belief before Marcus Thorne ever entered my life, long before his indifference shattered my world and transformed my perfect peaceful world into a singular burning purpose to dismantle the man who built his empire on sand and buried my family in the collapse. My life, before the fracture, was built on simple, sturdy things: a small house on a quiet street, the scent of my wife Eleanor's baking on a Sunday morning, the sound of my son Leo's laughter echoing from the backyard swing set. I was a structural engineer, a man who understood foundations, load-bearing walls, the physics of stability. I built things that stood firm against the wind and the rain. I thought my own life was just as solid. Marcus Thorne, the man who brought it all down, wasn't a monster in the conventional sense, not a snarling villain. He was worse. He was indifference personified, cloaked in wealth and influence. His construction firm, Thorne Enterprises, was a titan in the city, known for cutting corners, greasing palms, and leaving a trail of shoddy work and exploited labor in its wake. I'd seen their blueprints, the compromised supports, the cheap materials disguised as quality. I'd even filed a formal complaint once, citing egregious safety violations on a major downtown project. It went nowhere, buried under layers of bureaucracy and Thorne's considerable legal team. Then came the day the new wing of the city library collapsed. It was a Tuesday. Eleanor had taken Leo to story time. They loved the library, the smell of old paper, the hushed reverence of the reading rooms. The new wing, built by Thorne Enterprises, had been open less than a year. The news reports were chaotic at first, fragmented screams and sirens on the radio. Then I got the phone call. Eleanor, Leo, caught in the dust and rubble, victims of a structure designed to fail, a foundation built on greed. The world didn't just stop, it imploded. The sturdy walls of my life crumbled, leaving me standing in the ruins, breathing the dust of everything I loved. Grief was a physical thing, a constant, suffocating weight. Justice, I quickly learned, was just another structure that Thorne's money could easily dismantle. The investigation was a farce. Blame was deflected onto subcontractors, regulatory bodies, even the weather. Thorne himself issued a carefully worded statement, expressing deepest sympathies, while his lawyers ensured no liability stuck to his name or company. There were settlements, paltry sums offered to grieving families in exchange for silence, and signed waivers. They offered me $100K for my wife and son. As if money could restore what Marcus Thorne had taken from me, I refused. Their money felt like blood money. The system had failed. Utterly. The inquest was a performance, the lawyers were actors, and Thorne was the untouchable director, pulling the strings from his gilded cage. Every deflection, every carefully crafted lie, every smirking dismissal of responsibility felt like another ton of rubble dropped onto my chest. Despair was a huge, empty room I was trapped in. The silence broken only by the echoes of laughter that would never sound again. I sat in that room, numb, broken, watching the man responsible walk free, his empire untouched, his life continuing while mine was a pile of dust. It was in that profound, suffocating darkness, in the absolute zero of my despair, that the idea took root. It wasn't a flicker of hope. It was a dark, fertile seed in the scorched earth of my soul, watered by bitterness and the chilling realization that the structures of justice I had believed in were as compromised as Thorne's buildings. If justice wouldn't be served in a courtroom, if the system designed to protect us was just another facade for men like Thorne, then I would have to build my own. I would become the architect of Marcus Thorne's ruin. It wasn't enough for him to suffer. He had to lose everything, just as I had. His reputation, his fortune, his freedom, his carefully constructed life. I would dismantle his life, piece by piece, reveal the rot beneath his polished facade, until he was left with nothing but the wreckage of his own making. The first few years were spent in the shadows, mourning publicly while privately studying my enemy. I learned everything about Marcus Thorne, his daily routine, his habits, his vices, his family, a wife who him oblivious, 2 adult children more interested in spending his money than earning it. I studied his company's structure, its vulnerabilities, the network of corruption that propped it up. I, a structural engineer, was now analyzing the stress points in a human life and a corporate empire. I changed my name, grew a beard, adopted a new, unremarkable identity. I took a series of menial jobs that allowed me access to different layers of the city: a delivery driver, a security guard, even briefly, a cleaner in one of Thorne's less prestigious buildings. I was a ghost, watching, listening, collecting scraps of information that the city's elite carelessly discarded. My revenge was a blueprint, drawn in meticulous detail. Phase 1. Undermine his financial stability. Phase 2. Destroy his public image. Phase 3. Isolate him. Phase 4. The final collapse. Phase 1 began slowly, using anonymous offshore accounts and encrypted communications. I started shorting Thorne Enterprises stock based on my insider knowledge of their precarious financial state and upcoming failed projects, information I gleaned from disgruntled former employees and leaked internal memos. It was risky, requiring precise timing and a deep understanding of market manipulation. It wasn't a quick kill but a slow bleed, chipping away at his vast fortune. I also anonymously leaked incriminating documents about his tax evasion schemes to investigative journalists known for their tenacity. The resulting audits and fines were a significant blow, forcing Thorne to divert resources and attention. Phase 2 required a different approach: character assassination. Thorne had carefully cultivated an image of a philanthropic, upstanding businessman. I targeted his weaknesses: a penchant for illicit affairs, a history of mistreating employees, his blatant disregard for safety that had killed my family. I didn't fabricate lies. I unearthed truths he had buried. Anonymous tips sent to gossip blogs, carefully timed photos delivered to tabloids, disgruntled former associates encouraged to speak out with a little financial incentive from my anonymous accounts. The whispers started, then grew into a roar. His name, once synonymous with success, began to carry a stench of scandal. Phase 3 was isolation. His wife, tired of the scandals and the constant stress, filed for divorce, taking a significant portion of his remaining legitimate wealth. His children, embarrassed and cut off from his funds during the financial squeeze, abandoned him. Business partners, wary of the damage to their own reputations, distanced themselves. The network of corruption, built on loyalty bought with money, began to fray as the money dried up, and the risk increased. The man who had been surrounded by sycophants and associates found himself increasingly alone in his sprawling, empty mansion. Years passed. My face in the mirror was a stranger's. The grief for Eleanor and Leo was a dull ache now. Overshadowed by the cold fire of my purpose, I was no longer the man who built houses. I was the man who specialized in demolition. My hands, once skilled with blueprints and calculations, were now adept at navigating the dark web, crafting untraceable messages, and exploiting human weakness. I had become as calculating and ruthless as the man I sought to destroy. And Marcus Thorne. I watched his public appearances dwindle, his confident stride replaced by a nervous shuffle. The lines on his face weren't from age, they were etched by stress and fear. He was losing control, his empire crumbling around him, exactly as I had planned. The time came for Phase 4, the final collapse. I had saved the most damning evidence for last, undeniable proof, cross-referenced and verified, linking Thorne directly to the cost-cutting measures that led to the library collapse, along with evidence of witness tampering and obstruction of justice during the initial investigation. This wasn't just financial or reputational damage. This was prison time. I delivered this package of destruction to the one journalist I trusted to see it through, a woman who had lost a relative in the same collapse and had a reputation for fearless reporting. I chose a night I knew Thorne would be home alone. drowning his sorrows in his study. I wanted to be close, to feel the culmination of my years of work, to know that the architect of my ruin was finally facing his own. I didn't plan to confront him, just to be near, to watch as his world imploded. I slipped onto his vast estate under the cover of darkness, a ghost in the manicured gardens I had once cleaned. The mansion was silent, save for the distant murmur of the city. I found my way to the study window, peering inside. The air felt charged, heavy with the weight of years of anticipation. Every fiber of my being was focused on the man within, the culmination of my purpose finally within reach. There he was, Marcus Thorne, slumped in his leather chair, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring blankly at the flickering fire. He looked broken, defeated. My heart, a cold stone for so long, didn't just feel triumph. It surged with a fierce, almost terrifying elation. Every sleepless night, every calculated risk, every piece of my old life I'd sacrificed, it had all led to this singular, exquisite moment. The years of planning, of living only for this purpose, culminated in the sight of his defeat. He was ruined. He was alone. Justice, or my twisted version of it, was finally being served. As I watched, a subtle change came over the room. The shadows deepened, not naturally, but as if they were being thickened, given substance. The air grew cold, colder than the night outside. A hum started, building slowly until it was deafening, vibrating not just in my bones, but in the very glass of the window pane. Thorne stirred, his eyes widening, not with the recognition of my presence, but with a different kind of fear. He wasn't looking at the window, he was looking at the space above his desk. Then it descended. It wasn't a physical being, not in the way we understand bodies. It was a distortion, a tear in reality that unfolded into a shape that defied geometry. A shifting, iridescent void that pulsed with malevolent light. It was the source of the hum. And it spoke. Not with a voice, but directly into my mind. A chorus of alien thoughts that ripped through my consciousness, cold and sharp as shards of ice. The construct is complete. The resonance is sufficient. My blood ran cold. What construct? What resonance? Thorne, trembling, looked up at the distortion. His fear was palpable. A raw animal terror. But beneath it, a flicker of something else. Recognition. Yes. But also a terrible, weary resignation. He knew this was coming. The entity's presence focused on Thorne, and another wave of alien thought washed over me, clearer this time. A horrifying explanation unfolding directly in my mind, not in words, but in pure, dreadful understanding. He served his purpose. The catalyst was effective. Catalyst? What catalyst? My mind screamed the question into the psychic void. My carefully constructed world beginning to fracture around me. The disruption, the energy released by the sudden violent cessation of multiple resonant frequencies, the grief, the rage, the singular, sustained focus of a shattered consciousness. It creates a unique harmonic, a key, resonant frequencies, grief, rage, my family, the pieces slammed together with sickening force. Eleanor, Leo, their vibrant lives, their unique frequencies, abruptly silenced. Thorne's frequency, strong and tied to the material world, disrupted by the dismantling of his life. And mine. And yours. The architect, your frequency, once stable, was shattered. Rebuilt around a single, powerful vibration. Vengeance. The years of focus, the meticulous dismantling, the sustained hatred. This was the perfect resonator. You amplified the harmonic. You honed the key. The truth crashed down. A cosmic weight that flattened my soul. My revenge, my pain, my life since the collapse. It wasn't my struggle for justice. It wasn't about punishing Thorne. It was a process, a calculation. I hadn't been seeking vengeance. I had been farming a specific kind of energy, a specific frequency of suffering and focused intent required by this thing. Thorn wasn't the architect of my ruin. He was just the initial demolition charge, the trigger. I was the sustained, directed force that cleared the ground, honed the energy, built the mechanism for this. I was the architect, not of his ruin, but of the very key this entity needed. The horror of it was absolute, a despair so profound, it made my previous grief feel like a child scraped knee. The gate is prepared, the path is open. The distortion above Thorn intensified, swirling faster, deeper, no longer just a tear, but a yawning maw, a doorway into realms that burned the mind with their impossible colors and shapes. Thorn looked at the entity, then back towards the window where he seemed to sense my presence. Even though he couldn't see me, there was no smugness now, only a profound, weary despair, and a chilling finality. It is time. His voice was a dry whisper that somehow cut through the hum, a confession in the face of the infinite, devoid of the arrogance I'd always associated with him. The terms are met, the debt is paid. He looked back at the entity, his eyes wide with a terror that transcended human fear, but also a strange, terrible peace. My ancestors' bargain, finally concluded? The entity didn't respond in words, but the thought chorus confirmed it, filling my mind with the cold, ancient history of it all. This was a debt, inherited, a price agreed upon by a distant ancestor. Marcus Thorn's life, his actions, his carefully cultivated indifference. This was his lifelong penance, a necessary coping mechanism to perform the terrible, calculated acts required to fulfill the terms, and finally break the chain for his own children. The Thorn line had been marked, their lives subtly guided, their deaths calculated for generations, all for the pleasure of this entity. The library collapse, the deaths of my family, his escape from justice. It isn't just part of his price, it was part of the inherited price. A specific set of circumstances required to create the perfect harmonic, the specific frequency of shattered grief, and focused vengeance needed to power the gate. My subsequent descent into revenge, my years of pain and focus, were the final necessary payment, the honing of the key that he was obligated to facilitate. He hadn't escaped justice because he was rich. He had escaped because his continued existence, and my reaction to it, was necessary for this entity's plan. A plan set in motion generations ago. My grief, my rage, my life's singular purpose, it was all just fuel for its gate, a debt I was forced to help pay, unknowingly, with the ashes of my family. The distortion pulsed, and Thorn's form began to shimmer, to distort, not destroyed, but integrated. His physical structure, his consciousness, his very being, was being pulled into the impossible geometry of the gate. He didn't scream. He simply dissolved into the light, another frequency absorbed into the cosmic mechanism. The entity turned its full, incomprehensible attention towards me, standing outside in the cold garden. The hum was unbearable, threatening to tear my own mind apart, a psychic shriek of alien triumph. The resonator is no longer required. The frequency is stored. I felt a pull, not physical, but existential. A sense of being unraveled, of the threads of my being, plucked and stored like data. I wasn't being killed. I was being archived, like I no longer had any purpose. The gate above Thorn's desk flared one last time, then snapped shut, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone, and something else, something ancient and cold. The hum receded, not disappearing entirely, but settling back into that maddening, subtle vibration beneath reality. I was left standing in the garden, the cold seeping into my bones. Thorn was gone, absorbed into some cosmic mechanism. My revenge was a cruel joke, a meticulously crafted engine of suffering that served an alien purpose I couldn't even grasp. I hadn't destroyed my enemy. I had been his unwitting accomplice in opening a door to something terrible, fulfilling a debt I didn't even know existed, with the lives of those I loved most. The man who built solid structures, the grieving husband and father, the cold, calculating avenger. Who was I now? My purpose was gone, revealed as a lie. My identity, so long defined by my hatred and my quest, was hollowed out. I was just the leftover shell of a tool, used and discarded. The crushing weight of this realization, the understanding that my most profound pain had been used, orchestrated, and made a part of an ancient, alien transaction, was a new, bottomless abyss of despair. There were no answers left, only the horrifying truth that I was a puppet who had orchestrated his own strings being pulled, a necessary component in a cosmic debt payment. The city lights twinkled in the distance, oblivious. People slept in their sturdy houses, living their solid lives, unaware of the hum, unaware of the architect, of their reality, and the price paid in human suffering to maintain the facade. I walked away from the mansion, not towards anywhere, just away. The weight of grief was back, but heavier now, mixed with existential horror, in the profound, crushing understanding that my deepest pain, my most consuming purpose, had been nothing more than a frequency, tuned and exploited by something vast and utterly indifferent. The cost of my vengeance wasn't just my soul, it was revealing the terrifying truth that we are all just vibrations in a cosmic symphony, played for an audience we can't comprehend, and sometimes our most profound suffering is the note they need to hear. Sweet dreams.